Welcome, everyone, to the Anthony and Todd Show, a weekly podcast that critiques and memes music. I'm your host, Vincent, a.k.a. Nicolas Jaar from Born Again.
That's like such an outdated reference. We haven't done Far From Home, like Far From Born Again in like months.
I know, but I like fitting in it anytime I can.
Like it fits in well, and it's a great track, but just so fucking dated.
I'm joined by my ever-attentive co-host, my best friend, my pal, my amigo, my DRUMZ, Jonathan.
AKA zebra cats are just albino tigers.
Are they just called like white tigers? I did some research on that AKA, and I think that's what they're called. They're just variations of Bengals.
Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't say your more important AKA.
Oh, my second AKA, because I got two. Spirituality and disinfecting your shopping cart before use is an effective way to stop the spread of the coronavirus.
Yep. This is episode 138 of the Anthony and Todd Show, an episode we would like to call Tyler Creator was French the entire time. Today we're going to go over some exciting releases that we're going to review for you this week. We're going to go over Igorr's Spirituality and Distortion, Zebra Cats, Less is More, Nicolas Jaar's Cienzas. Cienzas?
I can't help you with this one. You're on your own, bud.
I don't know how to pronounce Spanish words, so I'm sorry on that on all fronts.
2 years of Chinese and 1 year of German, so that is not helpful at all there.
I took 3 years of Spanish.
So you should have this.
No, because the education system in America is just bullshit. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then finally, Deeper with Auto Pain. The pain automatically renews at the beginning of the month.
You know, I'm just going to throw this out here now. When your band name is Deeper, you have to be very careful with your album titles, because when you make your band name Deeper and your title name Auto Pain, this is some weird BDSM territory that you're getting into.
God damn it, I missed an AKA. It should have been Auto T-Pain. Damn it, so close. That would have been a good one too. Before we start, if you want to follow the Anthony and Todd Show on social media, find us Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Anthony and Todd. You can find us youtube.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. Find us at Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and Spotify by searching the Anthony and Todd Show in your favorite podcast browser. Now, with any further ado, time to get in this new Tyler the Creator album.
Igorrr.
No, the latest Igorrr album, Spirituality in Distortion. Igorrr, a.k.a. Jatier Suri?
Yup. Gautier?
I
don't fucking know how to do anything in French.
I can't pronounce English, let alone a ton of vowels, because I can't read super well.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce French.
Gautier Suri is a French musician who is mostly known for combining a bunch of conflicting genres and having them mesh well together beautifully. Metals like black metal.
I'd say more goth metal than black metal.
Yeah, I meant to say genres, not metal, but like genres like black metal, Baroque music, breakcore, and trip hop, just all blending together. Even some like world music elements being applied to this, some folk elements being applied to this. He released an album back in 2017 called Savage Sinusoid. It's out like a dinosaur that has a huge sinus cavity.
It's a mathematical term.
What does it mean?
Do you know what like a sine curve is and like that type of shit? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I always thought it was like some nose math.
No.
I was really interested, and then you made it boring.
Yeah, sorry.
So I haven't listened to that album, but apparently it was the starting point for this, and this is more their wider release with some other collaborators on here. Laurel Lay Purinek, I'm going to say that, on soprano vocals. Lornette Lenore on vocals, and Sylvian Beauvais on drums. The drumming on this album is completely insane. Let's just start off with that. That is one of the most distinctive elements on here, and it is the most crazy hybrid of like breakcore and metal, and it just sonically is just fever-inducing.
It's
in a sense,
full-blown drum assault on your eardrums, and it's amazing.
It doesn't really. And the strange thing about it is that like it never really takes up a huge amount of the mix. It feels
Yeah.
like it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like everything feels welcoming around.
It doesn't go lightning bolt with the drumming where it's overtaking every other element where that's all you can focus on.
Yeah, so this new album, Spiritualities and Distortions, 14 tracks, about 50 minutes of material, and it is sonically pushing genres and blending them together into ways that seem gimmicky at first, but then they sonically progress into something grander than their parts, the individual parts.
Yeah.
So while these things seem like they shouldn't go together, they sonically are curated in a way that blends so effortlessly that at the end, it doesn't matter whether accordion should be in a metal track or not. You just welcome it. Like that's just that at that point, it's just expected. I want accordion in all my metal now. If there isn't at least one accordionist in every metal album from here on to the end of time, I'm going to be very disappointed.
If Ghost doesn't immediately just go out and find an accordionist, that band should just
that just seems right up their niche anyway. Like that just seems Black Sabbath as an accordion, and it's Ozzy Osbourne. He folds himself up and then he sings.
Unfortunately, Black Sabbath
accordion.
Can't right their ultimate wrong of never having an accordion because they're officially done making music.
Never say never.
That was an album title.
There's also a Justin Bieber song.
Yep.
The more important end.
Sure.
So yeah, this thing is constantly insane and on the wall in the sense of that it's like these combinations should in no possible sense ever work, but they're given total care that they are blended together with supreme effortlessness, and they just work out. And this gives like the album a weird blend of not only elements throughout, so it constantly is varying and progressing into different textures, but everything feels full force, like everything feels fleshed out. Like when you bring in a new element, it serves a purpose into the grander scheme, and it builds up the track and progresses into a further nature. And then like also in the sense it's like a lot of these elements bring in different tonal shifts to the track, so they'll either hype them up or cool them down in different sense, and like you get variations of the tempo and the environment throughout here, so everything seems flowing and constant, and like it could change. It's very gelatinous in shape.
Yeah, and it's crazy because there's so many insane elements going into this album. Like you already mentioned, there's just not random, but there's just accordion thrown into this mix. And normally when an album is like set up in this way where these things are like flowing and changing as often, sometimes the elements feel jarring and out of place. But everything here just works. Like when the accordion showed up for the first time, even though like it was the first time I heard it, it still felt like it made sense. Everything feels like it belongs where it's at, and for an album to be this noisy, this chaotic, this seemingly insane, the fact that everything still feels very much planned out and belonging is incredible.
Yeah, we're referencing the track Musette Maximum, which has this accordion, constant striking drums, twingy guitar. I don't know what more you would want. It's just such a livid and verbose collaboration of elements that it just seemingly blends together into this weird mix of Ratatouille soundtrack meets prototypical metal album, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's some also really interesting collaborations, like on Very Noise, you get this amplified madness, this complete nonsense of a track with almost like a train going off the tracks. Like everything's just kind of falling off the edge. You have rapid fire guitar and drums. These two elements simultaneously are doing their own thing. They're in these two separate universes, but somehow they are able to mash up perfectly on top of one another and frantically match with the insanity of the other element, blending together. Like while these things are in the same genre, they still frantically feel like two separate worlds being blended together. Nervous Waltz is a mix of classical with metal, and it works beautifully and doesn't really come off as a gimmick. It has a completely hypnotic drum breakdown. It has world-bending combination of vocals and a background of drums as a transition. It has beautiful violins that ring in the apocalypse at the end of the track with this glitchy mix of guitars and strings. It's just insane.
Yeah, the classical elements
pushing it to the edge.
When previously I had told Vincent and he failed to do this, but I told him to look up some older, more extreme forms of like the gothic metal genre, because there's clearly a lot of influence from that genre on this, with the mix of like the Baroque elements and the classical elements, and the violins offend this very heavy metal soundscape. That's a combination that's been around for a couple decades now because of the gothic metal genre. And while that genre is really fucking gimmicky, as most gothic genres are, this takes all those elements in a way that kind of removes the gimmick, despite the fact that this album would seem to be even more of a gimmick than those. Everything here fits a lot better than I think I've ever heard it from the gothic metal genre, like all of the classical elements.
Hollow Tree has harpsichord blended perfectly with some gnarly guitars. It has these breakneck drums, classy vocals, completely epic. The vocals on here are very operatic, insane. At the end, you get this strange duet on Kung Fu Chevre with the return of the accordion. Accordion's on this track, but then you get this surreal duet that happens in a nightmarish apocalypse. And at some point, it turns into a funk track. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
That track is amazing. That track is probably hands down my favorite track off this album. It mixes so much different stuff just together in an insane way that just is probably the most bizarre and surreal like song that you could have gotten off of this album. Just everything that it's kind of touched upon a little bit just like kind of gets thrown in at these times, and it's just a great little mixture of all of their great elements in such a fun and bizarre way. I love fucking that track. It's amazing. Par
Pairing is this surprise mix of chiptune and metal that has a featured vocalist, George Corpse Grinder Fisher, who I think he's not completely terrible. I think he's pretty just normal for this album. Like, he doesn't blend with the elements as well as I would like him to. He doesn't completely demolish the track, because I think the chiptune production is one of the most surprising elements on here, and the synthetic mix of twang that it brings is just completely unreal. And it continues on a couple other moments on this album with these weird glitchy moments, like on Camel Dancefloor. It's an epic mix of Eastern tune guitar, electronica, and rock, and it's this these glitches warp everything. Like, it's like you remove the frame from the picture, and the picture like loses its shape in a sense. It reminds me, that's a bad analogy, but it reminds me of like an episode of Ed, Edd and Eddy where it's like a bunch of dream sequences.
Oh, they took the lines off the cartoons?
Yeah, they took the line off of Jimmy and he just like melted into a liquid.
Yeah.
Like, it's just completely removing the shape. Like, when you have these moments, it completely removes all atmosphere from that current moment and just shifts you to another realm for about a second, and then you're back. It's like you're blacking out for a moment and coming back to this weird gelatinous hell. Oh, this album is completely insane. I could talk about this all day, but I think at the end it is surprising with its operatic vocals, very twangy guitar, sporadic, insane, breakneck drums. Everything just combines on top of each other into this weird dog pile of ideas that works together beautifully into this beautiful mound of creativity. And I can't say any more.
Yeah, this is an album that you told me, basically showed me like 2 tracks, and we had no idea what the hell to expect when this full album came out. And this 100% blew away any expectation I had going into it. This album was amazing, and I love it.
Yeah, keep in mind all scores if you're telling me this right now. I think this is a big boy, easy cheesy 9 out of 10 on this one.
This is an easy 9.5 for me.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I hope to hear more from Igorrr in the future. I really enjoyed this collaboration. It's just frantic and fun and just a lot of creativity sparking out of so many collaborations and ideas being put in the same melting pot.
Yeah.
Are you ready to pet a cat?
Where is my cat?
No, not that cat. Other cat. Zebra
I can't
cat.
pet your cat. Social distancing.
No, zebra cat.
I can't pet that cat either. Social distancing.
Oh yeah, look at the coronavirus. Time to go over the latest Zebra Cats album. Less is more. Oh no, it's actually, I put emphasis on the end. It's all in caps, so it's less is more.
Yeah. Gotta shout that shit.
Yeah. OJ Morgan is a New York artist, rapper, and producer who produced the hit single "I'ma Read," which is like his most known track up to this point. I'm not super familiar with his works thus far. I know he featured on the Gorillaz album "Humans" back in 2017.
But that's a bad Gorillaz album, so...
Yeah, and he was on one of my least favorite tracks, "Murder Sex Party," but he wasn't the worst part of that track, so it was more that the other dude, the other feature on it. But like, he was on a couple other tracks where he had moments. I really liked his deep, dark voice, the ominous, the mysteriousness of it. I really enjoyed.
That single really hit home for me, though, back when this whole quarantine started, because I was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, I'm going to read.
I hate you so much.
Good.
This new album, Less is More, is his debut studio album. It's 15 songs, 39 minutes, and he has a hand in producing all these tracks with a bunch of other collaborators and co-producers on here. It's the Bandcamp description of this says it's a sonic experiment that messes industrial hip-hop with drum and bass. That's pretty close to what it is. I would say more like dance music with industrial hip-hop.
Yeah.
Probably the closest. Drum and bass. There are some drum and bass moments on here, though, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of in this all realm of like industrial glitch hop. I get like shades of Cakes to Killa and Injury Reserve. There's glitchy use of these weird vocal samples throughout this entire thing that are surprisingly insane. The opening on this thing with the zebra fucking cat, this like frail voice projects you into this oddity of experimental noise on the opening track, more Intro to Less, which is just this sonic noise palette of just a bunch of various noise sketches stacked on top of each other. Mm-hmm. And it kind of set the palette of, oh yeah, this is just gonna be insane.
Yeah.
Like this is gonna be like in your face the entire time. And for all this, I think besides one track, this thing is constantly up in your face. It's constantly flashy and confident. It has a sweet swagger to it. Not only the production itself by being so rich, but Zebra Cats with his confidence is just insane, with his deep, smooth, and reserved voice on here. I absolutely love. I think he projects a lot of charisma on here.
His voice like really threw me for a loop, because I was like, when I first heard it, I was expecting it to kind of wear thin and kind of become this kind of bland, singular, monotonous like flow. But even though he doesn't change it up a lot, he's able to carry a lot of personality within a very refined and not bombastic vocal performance.
The track Ish kind of sets everything up by having sonically just the insane palette for him to kind of just strut on, just go walk on the track and just essentially just showcase himself. Then you get into Lousy, which is more slow and calculated. It's over just a thick 808 and slight distorted noise in the background. It's more sluggish, but I think in the grander scheme of things, it's like one of the weaker moments on here, but I think in the displaying the potential of his versatility as an artist, it showcases a lot more. I think the performance of the track means a lot more than it actually is in the grander scheme of things. Blush has this warped synth that's like pretty underwhelming. His performance seems a bit lacking. Like these two tracks back to back, Lousy and Blush, just kind of don't mesh well together. They're kind of too much of the same thing. They have some of the more weaker production that's more repetitive on it. I just think those blends of two tracks don't really work for this album because the rest of the album's so frantic, or so it does this more reserved style much better with minimalism. In is probably the best track on here, with drum and bass production with random strings thrown in the mix. It's grandiose, flashy. His deep voice really emphasizes the texture of the track and how he really bounces on it, and he emphasizes the low end of the mix. I think is truly extraordinary. Zad drums is this intense drum breakdown with Zebra Cats confidently strutting on top of this insane dog pile of insanity.
Yeah.
Monitor's a dark industrial track with the futuristic presence of S. Rustin on it. Like almost like robotic type presence with your standards I can never meet. Attack, release, you felt my pulse, you squeeze. It just seems almost like cyborgish in a sense. Monitoring your heartbeat, very AI-esque. I just found it to be very, I don't know, all-knowing in a sense. In a way that, and also like a weird element of paranoia, which I found really interesting. The collaborators on this, the features that he has, like really are different from him, and they really highlight these moments. Like at the end, Lick It and Split with Shy Girl is just insane because there's this rapid fire drum loop, and Shy Girl has this sultry, rushing performance over top of it where she's like being very sexual. Zebra Cats is just completely manic, and just like this is the moment where he loses his lid. It just goes insane, like just has no control whatsoever. Up is a sporadic hollow percussion with this chorus sample low in the mix that gets warped and distorted throughout the track. No One Else is another noise moment that I don't really think is needed on here because the beginning of end of this are pretty much the same thing, and to have that one additional moment of like an interlude towards like the third of the album is not really that interesting. Yeah. Like it doesn't like have anything that projects Zebra Cat's character or the progression of the album, because I think like having two bookmarks at the beginning and the end really bookends it.
Yeah, it adds like a sense of structure and completion to the album.
Yeah, but to have one in like the middle really doesn't.
Yeah, that kind of messes all that up.
Sleeping reminds me of like a Tonight beat with this weird simple vocal snippet progressing into tight large percussion that consumes the mix. And then finally Necklace, he's more moody and frail with vocals that sound like an A$AP Rocky track, like something he would reject. I think of like Call Drops off of Testing, like a track I'm not really keen of, but something where it seems very effortless, but a sense of a pure emotion. And I think he does a pretty good job on here with simple atmospheric guitar in the background that just completely sets up the mood to where it goes. It's a nice break between all the hecticness in the remaining tracks or the surrounding tracks. The biggest thing I can knock this on, besides some like weak tracks, a few of them, is I just think the progression of this idea has a lot more scope than he's giving. Like I know there's more here.
Yeah, this feels
to dig, and this is only his first.
It feels a little incomplete somehow.
Yeah, like I know there's more to be had here. I know he does a really good job, but I think at the end I understand the character of Zebra Cats, but I don't understand really his motivations. I don't know a ton about him. I just know the character, the appearance that he showcases, not really him, or an overall theme or a setting to this, just more of a chaotic mess. That's truly fun. Like I think there's a lot of fun to be had here, and he's
this is a good
showcasing
album.
A ton of work. Like to just come out of the blue and like to get Damon Albarn's attention is like a huge book note, and then also like having like this grandiose of a project that's like this willing to take risk straight out of the gate is really impressive. Keep in mind all scores if you telling me this right now. I'm feeling a 7+ on this. I really enjoyed it.
I was feeling like an 8. I think this is like, it's really good. I feel like it's a little lacking and I want more, but I think that, and it kind of speaks for how good it is that I want more. Yeah,
it's a 7+, but I think it's on the edge of a central project. Like I still think it's there. I just think it's like there needs to be a jump a bit, but I think like where he is right now, like this is still incredible, and it still has some very noteworthy tracks that are essential listens on here.
Yeah.
For the way it's collaborating like dance music and hip hop and drum and bass with industrial is eclectic and strange.
All right, it's time to go over the latest Nicolas Jaar album. Sinizas.
Kanzu-tight.
That was terrible. That was a fucking awful joke. And I hate the fact that you roped me into being part of it.
Nicolas Jaar is a New York-based electronic composer and recording artist that fades between the realms of house, downtempo, IDM techno, ambient, and sometimes even plunderphonics. His most recent solo work besides this one, Sirens in 2016, was a huge skitty-scape that combined the realm of like almost like a city symphony with like ambient music, and I found to be a very interesting listen that was lacking at times and I think purpose, but I think truly had the idea of a soundscape down. After that, under the moniker of Against the Law of Logic, released 2012 to 2017, creating a weird mix of sampling and house music, combining into one of the most addictive and mind-controlling electronic albums in the last decade. It's completely consuming in everything you do. It completely gets you under its control. It's completely alluring and hypnotic, and it completely transcends a lot of genres by doing the best with a ton of simplicity. He followed that up with another Against All Logic album earlier this year, 2017 to 2019, which was... it had fundamentals, but it still wasn't sonically in the same place as the last one. It felt really weak in comparison. It wasn't a bad album by any means, but sonically what he was doing wasn't a step up or a progression into a new terrain, into something new. It just seemed kind of like a down step into a more empty terrain.
Yeah.
Now this new album, ranges in the realm of ambient, art pop, experimental music. It's interesting in how these realms kind of mix and how it projects a sense of isolation, because this album was written while Nicolas Jaar was kind of like isolating himself from the world, and he like stopped drinking and he separated himself off, and he tried to find a way to like balance himself off from negativity, but like he wanted to project himself through music, and in the end, like the darkness, even though he tried to like separate himself from a bunch of negative aspects of his life, like the darkness still found a way to creep in through the music, which I thought was like a really interesting concept. That at a time where everyone's isolated by force, Nicolas Jaar was ahead of the curve, and he's producing a project that's about isolation, or sonically in the same realm as isolation. And if it's a time period that's very strange,
do you
coincidental.
Think this like makes me wonder, do you think the artists who like recently did things like, I'm going to separate myself out to make my art, I'm going to do it by force, do you think they're kicking themselves because now they're forced to do it anyways by like everyone? Do you think they're upset? It's like, God damn it, I should have just waited a little bit. Now I'm doing it twice.
But then they weren't special.
I guess.
The reason they said they did it is because they wanted to be cool and just watch Netflix and then maybe play on the drum machine or paint something. I don't know.
Yeah. That's all I make art.
This album's 13 songs, 53 minutes, and it's honestly, after an album I was disappointed in, Nicolas Jaar kind of redeems himself and going into a new terrain, kind of forwardly compiling almost like a self-reflection of himself in music, which I found was really interesting. Even though he like the whole entire purpose was that he was trying to communicate through music, in the end he just kind of communicated how this lingering sense of negativity, which I thought was interesting. Yeah,
this album is, if there's definitely one thing you can say about this album, is it creates a mood, and that mood is very moody.
Like the opening to this Vanish is this metallic and glowing synth piece that transcends into these beautiful vocals that feel like they're falling in this eternal void. They're saying, say you're coming back, like this hopeful optimism for something. Musette is like this choir humming into oblivion as it comes into frame, along with other atmospheric noises that sound like footsteps but turn out to be like drums, and this creates like a weird soundscape loop that has like this loop has like a physical location, which I found was strange. Like what I thought was like distant footsteps that went with like the voices is now just like actual drums that were just like reverbed. I just found it to be like a weird sense of like shift of location of a pattern. Cienzas, which means ashes in Spanish, is like an emotional otherworld realm with this lovely Spanish vocals talking about, in the ashes we will form, knowing nothing now is better. There's no space for anything, but we are together without news of another world. This like sense of optimism. How can you live without a hope in life, or like an expected outcome, and then going to but why doesn't common sense respond? I can no longer use its language. The sense of being unable to communicate with the sense people around you is insanely cramped and isolating. I love the end with the drum coming into frame with these additional vocals, like balancing out the palette at the end of the track into a final location after transferring around a little bit. I thought was really unique. Ghosto has this harsh horn that welcomes you into a brassy, surrealist dream. Like a lot of this album feels very dreamlike in a sense, as like you're transferring in a bunch of different locations, almost like you're disassociating with yourself, which I thought was very interesting, that this album almost gives you like an out-of-body experience. Like you've been in isolation for too long, and now you're having cabin fever, to the sense where you don't know yourself anymore. You don't know what your reality is.
Yeah. There's a lot of dreamlike elements in there. Can't remember which track, but there was like one that had like almost like a little bit of like a jazz like influence that just really reminded me of the way like David Lynch and artists like that could merge like jazz with other things to create these really dreamlike atmospheres.
Yeah, Sunder has this rapid distortion that transfers into vocals looping into a playful synth patch. He's talking about, now I can see right behind my eyes. Just this idea is that you know everything in your life, like you could see everything, like you've almost reached the promised land in a sense, that like you've gone so beyond the bottom of the barrel that you're delusional. That I just found to be like almost like a weird surrealist moment, another weird surrealist moment in lyricism, that it's just like none of these components really add up, and it just equates to like this downtrodden falling off the deep end. Hello Chain has this choir stacked with strange pitch vox samples over the top to make this swirly harmony of sanity. Garden has this thick, rich grand piano that is put into a perfect place, and it weirdly begins cutting forward or behind on top of itself. Like it's just like it glitches out a little bit, not glitches, but more like skips forward, skips back a bit at the end of the track, and I found it just be a really strange moment that happens at the end. Xerox has a sharp and ear-piercing meditation like quality to it. The harmonizing vocals, the distorted and warping noises that rattle your brain are just insane. Like it just, everything just kind of meshes in and out of frame, like you're slowly losing exposure on your camera, and now everything's just kind of blending together, or slowly losing focus on your camera, and now everything's just kind of turning into a mesh. There's no definite shapes anymore. And then finally, Faith Made of Silk is the surprising normal pop moment at the end of this surreal journey. There's the warm vocals of Nicolas with light percussion and dreamy and comforting synths with a huge rapid fire breakdown at the end. Reminds me a lot of Julian Casablancas, talking about you have nowhere to go, look around, not ahead. A peak is just the way towards a descent. The forces on the hill manifested by what you perceive as wind, look around, not ahead. This idea of not getting your expectations up high because you know they're going to fail you, and kind of the trouble that has. Yeah. The problematic statement that is kind of the downer and the true heartbreaker to the end of this very isolated and captive album.
Yeah, this album is kind of a great piece of just really not necessarily bleak, but just lonely and somber atmosphere. Like the joke I made, like it creates a mood, and that mood is moody. Like it was a joke, but like it's also very true. Like the mood on here is one that is very somber and isolating and just kind of very filled with sorrow a lot of the times. But it builds that element and that emotion so masterfully that it's never really overwhelming, it really captures just the isolation elements of all of those feelings and just the way that they just kind of sit and linger with you.
I don't have anything else to say. Keeping in mind those scores, if you tell them this right now, I think this is an 8+. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is an 8.
Yeah, I just think sonically it is captive and controlled. It is at times very unhinged in the sense of almost like losing reality, escaping from almost yourself, like losing contact with yourself at times, just disassociating. I just find it very surprising mix of ambient and art pop. Are you ready to go deeper into the episode with this new, deeper album, Auto Pain?
I just want this episode to be over with now
You
because all
just
the
want
good albums are done. I'm done.
You want the Auto Pain to be over.
Yeah.
Deeper is a Chicago indie rock / post-punk trio consisting of singer and guitarist Nick Grohl, almost said Nick Grohl, which is the brother of Dave Grohl, bassist Drew McBride, brother of Danny McBride, and drummer Shiraz Bhatti.
Who has no famous brother.
Yeah, no famous brother.
No.
And it's driving him Bhatti. That was terrible.
It was terrible.
I loved it so much. I've heard a lot of hype about this album, just randomly out of the blue. I've just seen people talking about it. Never heard of this band before. Have no experience with their last self-titled debut album. So I was interested to see what all the hype was about. And then I discovered their Bandcamp page.
Always a mistake.
And it described this album, and I'm just going to explain it. So they compare this to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Auto pain is a concept meant to be an inverse to soma, a pill in the book which makes everything numb. The idea is auto pain to epitomize the desire to return to a connection with thoughts and clarity, which comes at the expense of feeling everything simultaneously.
So I'm just going to ask one quick question. Have you read Brave New World by any chance?
I lied and said I did, remember? For class.
Oh, right. Yeah, I actually have read it.
Yeah, but that was in the book you lied and said you read. That was a different book.
Yeah, no, I lied about reading a different book when I could have just told the truth and have read that book already.
The comparison
is stupid.
Yes.
As someone who has read the book and listened to this album, I get no connections between the two.
No, here's the thing. It's not that the connection of the two has any importance. It's the fact that, well, it does, but it's the fact that, like, it literally, there's no relation. Like, at the end, what you're saying is you're feeling everything always, and that's just kind of human life.
Yeah.
So,
it's
like,
significant in the book because the people didn't.
Yeah.
So this album is basically calling to go back to something when we never left that thing.
Or about, like, the character or, like, the themes around it, regaining, going back to that thing, and, like, it's just the same.
Yeah,
it's just typical post-punk. There's some nice synth work on here. I like how it blends. It reminds me a bit of The Cure. That's nice. But it also reminds me like other contemporary indie rock post-punk bands like Flower Truck, which I haven't thought of that band in a while, but also Out is a good one. This thing has some decent moments. Like, I like Esoteric. I like Run. I like The Knife. Like, there's fun tracks on here, but in the end, it's just, like, the themes are just generic.
Yeah, it's an album that's fun to listen to, like, in the moment, because it's a good example of just the basic elements of this genre that's really over fucking done right now. But because it's from a genre that's really fucking overdone right now, and it doesn't really do anything to set itself aside, when I'm not listening to it, all of the memories of it just mix in with everything else from that genre, and it doesn't do anything to stand out at all.
And that's this album. I don't have too much to say. Like, there really isn't a lot of distinctive elements that stand out, except for the lyricism being Just it wants to be it's depicting itself as something grander in nature, but at the end it's just like having emotions.
Yeah,
which like if it was interesting, like everyone has emotions, but just the fact that you have emotions doesn't make it interesting.
Yeah.
Like, and like the depictions of emotions you have on here aren't like creatively interesting. Just because something happens to you doesn't mean you need to depict it. To
quote the band Pup, just because you're sad again, it doesn't make it special at all.
It doesn't. Yeah, this is just... I don't understand why this is popular, but also Fontaine's DC is popular, so I guess nothing really can truly be explained.
You know, people just don't always have good taste.
Yeah, this wasn't the worst record I ever listened to, but it really just doesn't serve a purpose, and I don't understand why people are talking about it all of a sudden.
If you like the genre, give it a listen, but...
Maybe. But if you like the genre, you probably already heard this.
Yeah, and like you probably also
similar to this.
have a ton of better bands that you could listen to from that genre.
Yeah.
Probably like already queued up on your Spotify.
Yeah, keeping in mind those scores if you tell me this right now, I'm feeling a 3-4 on this.
I feel like it's not bad, so I'll give it like a 5 because it's just so down the road middle, but like it's still a why. Why is this getting so much hype?
Yeah. And that's it. We're going to leave it there for today's episode of the Anthony and Todd Show. If you want to follow us and keep up with us, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Anthony and Todd. You can find us at youtube.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. And you can find us at Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play Podcasts by searching the Anthony and Todd Show in your favorite podcast browser. Till next time, guys, I'm Vincent.
And I'm Jonathan.
And see ya, boyos.